Oh, Canada, baby. Things are looking up. Things are positive. I know it doesn't feel that way. You look at the news and look at all the things that have been covered and all the things that Trudeau has done or not done. Will the checks go through for $250? Will that kill our economy? What's going on with the GST freeze? Jugmeat says we're not going to support Trudeau if he doesn't give it to seniors, and then we're going to break it apart. Like, there's so much garbage going on with that. It's a bit of a headache to really deal with. There was so much gobbledygook that came out of my mouth that it's like, oh man, it's another headache. Well, I've got news for you folks. I've got encouragement. I've got hopium to share with you today. The news is full of so much trash because we are led by such incompetence. It's hard to get away from it. It's hard to see something that's actually positive coming out of this government. Well, I assure you, there's some encouragement to be had. We're going to talk about all of it. So first off, you remember we talked about this last week. Trump's tariffs, 25%. You don't get your border sorted out. Then obviously everything in Canada kind of hit the fan and everyone started freaking out over what this means or when Trump says something like this, he means it. What's going to happen here? Everyone kind of really took the threat seriously because a 25% tariff on our economy would literally shatter anything we have left in this country. So the premiers took it upon themselves. Like, hey, Trudeau, can we have a meeting about this? Can we talk about what we're going forward here? And so the talk all became about the 25% tariffs. Can Canada handle 25% tariffs? Can Canada do this? Can Canada handle a shot like that to the economy? Will Canada respond with tariffs onto the US? Those are the conversations that were happening. People kept avoiding the conversation of, how about you just fix the border? Simple idea. And luckily, common sense prevailed because that was the main discussion that came out of these meetings. And to the normal Canadian, to the regular Canadian, you don't really think of Canada's border to the States being all that big of an issue. It's never been historically an issue. There's always things that are going to come. Crime comes across, illegal guns, this, that, the other, but nothing of a significant where it's like, we got to secure our border. This conversation is happening for the first time in our history. I wouldn't say first time, maybe that's a little over the top, but it is one of the first times, one of the very few times where border security is becoming a conversation in this country. Border security. You know, when I was talking to some of my lefty friends about this and, talking about, yeah, we need to secure our borders. It's pretty simple. And they were all freaking about the tariffs. Oh, Trump's going to the bad boy. Trump's going to do some stuff with the tariffs. I'm like, we can just secure our borders. It's like, and they would not even fathom or even entertain the idea that there's a problem with our border. We have the largest open border in the world with the US. We have several points of entry, of course, along that border. But most of it is unpatrolled. It's an unprotected border for the most part. But now bad actors are coming to our country and taking advantage of a social contract we've had with the US that we never needed to patrol our border because you don't usually immigrate people here who are willing to break laws and cause issues in the United States and vice versa. And so when you hear about the crime that's coming across, the fentanyl and the drugs, obviously the opioid epidemic is an issue in and of itself. We don't really think much about the people that are coming across the border. And so I thought it was interesting. Let's look at before we get to the hopium, let's look at what the actual problem is. And the problem is we have so many known terror suspects coming into Canada, illegally crossing the border into the United States. And this is the types of things that Trump had issue with. From the U.S. Customs and Border Protection website and coming into contact with known terrorists going into the country, the terror screening data on their website. So you have the southwest border, obviously, which is then with Mexico, then the northern border, which is with us. 2023, 484 known terror suspects crossed into the United States at a point of entry. Okay? At a point of entry. Up from the year before at 313, which was up from the year before at 54, which obviously that was a COVID year. But it was still up from 2020, 124, which was that was the real COVID year. And it was still up from 2019 at 258, still up from 2018, still up from 2017. 2023 was a record-breaking year for terrorists crossing from Canada into the United States at points of entry. Obviously, you have the data down here of encounters between ports of entry. Remember I said that we have the largest border that's unpatrolled? So naturally, these numbers are going to be super low because you can just walk across a farm field into the United States. Very easy, unpatrolled. Very rarely are you going to pick up somebody versus obviously what's happening in the southwest border. This is what's the backdrop to Trump having concern. Obviously on top of the drug issues, fentanyl, this, that, the other. He's like, get your crap together, Canada, or I'm going to slap you with a 25% tariff. Pretty simple. And that's what annoyed me about the conversations. It was all circulated around, well, how are we going to retaliate? And I was like, I really hope you're not going to respond that way. I hope you're actually going to address the actual issue of what's going on. And the premiers got together and said, yes, we need to figure this out. And they met with Trudeau to talk about it. Danielle Smith is looking to have a very proactive approach and working with the authorities in Montana, as well as Alberta, to make sure they secure the border, at least her portion of the border in Alberta. Premier Danielle Smith said the government will be moving to protect its shared border with Montana, with more details to be announced soon. Although Smith opposes any tariffs on Canadian U.S. products, she said, it is my view that President Donald Trump and the tens of millions of Americans who voted for him have valid concerns related to illegal migrants and drug smuggling at our shared border. We know that the problem is much more serious at the Mexican-U.S. border. However, that does not diminish the need for the federal government in every province bordering the United States to take immediate steps to crack down heavily on these illegal border activities, said Smith in a Wednesday statement. Again, known terror suspects way higher in Canada than Mexico. Whereas obviously it's a different sort of story going from Mexico to the United States with just random people just trying to get across into the States. That's a different story. We have the more potent, in some ways, issue of having known terrorists using Canada as what they call a landing pad to gather supplies and figure things out so they can get into the United States. So Danielle Smith really taking that seriously. You know, that's what her point was when what she meant was obviously there's typically more issues at the Mexico-US border versus ours, but we still got to do our job. And when she said that, I kind of more so think she was referring to the amount of illegal migrants crossing in from Mexico to the United States. Smith started off saying by saying the Council of the Federation had a meeting with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau to discuss an approach to dealing with the 25% tariff on Canadian products threatened by the incoming Trump administration. In addition to speaking about the border, she expressed the need for the Canadian government to aggressively move up compliance with our country's NATO obligations of a 2% GDP spent on our military forces, which is yet another concrete way to solidify our economic and military alliance with the United States. In the coming months, my ministers and I will be working aggressively to reach out to our U.S. allies involved with the incoming U.S. administration and congressional leadership to work on strengthening our economic and energy partnership and detailing the work that premiers across the country are actively engaged in to strengthen our nation's border security, she said. Alberta's premier, Danielle Smith, taking this very seriously and urging Trudeau to take it seriously as well. So much so that she's going and taking it upon herself to work with Montana, the state right below Alberta, making sure they work together to secure that border. The idea of drones was also floated around as well, which is very interesting to have an aerial patrolling our northern border. And we're going to skip over Manitoba at the moment. We're going to go right to Ontario. And Doug Ford has gone forward and talked about how they're going to approach it. And he's right now in deep conversations with the OPP and CBSA to see how they can work together to secure the border. This is something even Ford's taking very seriously, being like, we need to do our job on this. Yes, I'm not happy with the tariffs. Yes, I would love to, in Ford's words, he would love to counteract and reciprocate with tariffs onto the U.S. But even he is saying, yeah, we got to figure this out. And he's been in meetings with the OPP and making sure they're able to support the CBSAs. And OPP is now committed to patrolling Lake Ontario as well to make sure there's no illegal activities happening on Lake Ontario to cross over in the U.S. OPP has also talked about how they want to support the CBSA and whatever they need to make that happen. And what the conversation keeps coming back to with a lot of these premiers is CBSA right now and our RCMP are underfunded to be able to take on this endeavor. I talked about this on the Carvaca podcast last night. The question was asked to me, Josh, do you think Canada has the means to take on this project, to secure our borders, to make sure that we deport anyone who is a known terror suspect, to make sure that there is no harm being done to our country and then also using our country to get into the United States? Do you think Canada can do this? My answer was, I don't even think the states can handle what their deportation process is going to look like, let alone Canada, who hasn't even met their NATO targets and military spending. What are they going to do? And that was legitimately where my head was at last night. I don't know how Canada's going to do this. But then I saw the premier stepping up and having conversations and trying to bolster their people and bolster their resources. And admittedly, I started getting encouraged. I was like, whoa, we actually might be able to pull this off. The reason why I said what I said on the Carvaca podcast is because our federal government's in shambles. They don't know what they're doing. And they've completely gutted our political class and all the resources we've had. They've shirked their responsibilities, gutted out our middle class, and made sure all that money funnels to their buddies. And then obviously the premiers and the provinces haven't been playing nice with the federal government. So I was just like, everything's just too, in my perspective, is too broken to really make any meaningful impact, which will lead to the inevitability of these 25% tariffs. And Danielle Smith came out with this and saying how much she wants to work with Montana. Ford came out talking about how much the OPP and CBSA are working together with the state of New York to make sure that their border's secure. I was like, whoa, okay. Then before all this dropped, Premier of Quebec, Legault, said that we can't afford to have a Roxham 2.0. On Tuesday, he announced that the Sûreté du Québec will begin to patrol the border with the United States, which is their provincial police force. And it was really cool. Now we're seeing Alberta, Ontario, Quebec starting to take their border security super seriously and working with their American counterparts to make sure it's secure. It was really cool to watch. It's really cool to see that the fact they're working together and trying to make this happen and make sure we have a safer border and make sure no illegal activity takes place, or at least very minimal versions of it. And the reason why I skipped over Wab Kinew is because this was probably the most telling one of all. Wab Kinew, Premier of Manitoba, he had the meeting with the premiers and Trudeau, and he came right downstairs the steps and had an interview with the press right after the meeting. And this is what he had to say.
All today is that we as Manitoba are happy to play a role in a unified Team Canada approach to strengthening the relationship with the United States of America. And in particular, this week I've been calling on the federal government to increase their investment in the RCMP here in Manitoba, as well as law enforcement generally. We know that this would help to respond to concerns that are being articulated around the border. But the point that I made to the Prime Minister and to the premiers on the call is, listen, Manitobans have long been talking about drugs being an issue in our communities. This is going back many years. And so what's the downside? If we invest in law enforcement and we crack down on drug trafficking here at a time when that message might be well received in the States, at the same time, we're going to make communities safer here in Manitoba. Of course, I also raised the importance of the agriculture industry. This is the backbone of our economy here in Manitoba, and I made the point that in the prairies, Manitoba in particular, the ag sectors that are important to us need to have that strong voice at the table. One of the other points that I raised, of course, and this touches on ag, but on many other issues too, is that we need to have a clear strategy when it comes to China. Of course, the conversation right now with respect to President-elect Trump has a lot to do with the border and has to do with drugs, and we want to show that we're strong on that. But we know that the United States of America is also reorienting their relationship on trade with China. And here in Manitoba, given the current dynamic, we need to see a clear strategy. And then the other point that I made was, again, to reiterate that we need to hit that 2% target when it comes to the proportion of our economy that we spend on our military. This is not just something that shows the Americans that we're a good ally and a trusted partner when it comes to national security, Arctic security. This is also something that's good for our province. We have a lot of folks who serve in the Canadian Armed Forces here in Manitoba. We have a big aerospace industry. We have bases here. More investment in the military will also help us here at home.
Isn't that awesome? I was so encouraged to hear the points that Wab Kinew brought up. And again, all common sense approaches, all common sense things that he's talking about. Of course we want to secure the border. We secure the border, we make Manitoba more safe. Makes sense to me. Why don't we just do it? And also him bringing up again the 2% NATO targets. Yeah, we need to start investing more in our military, investing in the RCMP, investing in our law and order. We want to do our part. He's kind of openly saying we want to do our part to secure Manitoba's portion of the border. It was amazing to hear, amazing to see. And all the premiers seem to be echoing, or at least all the major player premiers are echoing the same sentiments. Yes, we want to secure the border. We need to increase military spending, and we need to make sure we hit in those targets to make sure we are doing our job on the global scale with our military. So let's protect the border, secure the border, and make sure we get a good trade deal with the U.S. Pretty simple what they want. This is the hopium I've been talking about. This is the hopium I addressed at the beginning of the show. We have Premier Daniel Smith, Conservative out of Alberta. Premier Wab Kinew, NDP out of Manitoba. We have Premier Ford, Conservative, neocon out of Ontario, from my perspective. Legault, securing his portion of the border in the name of the same issues. Unity amongst the premiers is huge on this. It would be one thing if they were all conservatives, but they've come from all kinds of different political stripes who all agree on this very same issue. Let's secure the border, increase military spending, and let's get a good trade deal with the United States. Team Canada, baby. This should encourage you as Canadians. As much as things have been happening and, our current federal government hasn't given us much hope, this is awesome. This is a great moment for us. This is a day that you should be able to celebrate as a Canadian. You should be able to take hope and be encouraged by this. It's one win and move stride forward into us getting our country back, establishing law and order, establishing peace, prosperity here in our country, Canada. All the premiers, different political stripes, putting aside partisanship, coming together and doing their part to secure our border in the absence of leadership at the federal level. This is pretty awesome. And I'll finish off with this. I got an email from a listener named Chad Carney saying, Josh, it's just feeling a little too negative lately. I just kind of need some love and something to laugh about. I miss you guys' wildcard segments. And I was like, yeah, honestly, I do too. Obviously, you can tell that we've taken a different approach to the show now that I'm a one-man show. I'm trying to figure things out. But I agree with you, Chad. I'm agreeing that, yes, it's been a little doom and gloom lately. And I do want to get back to doing those things. So we'll do it starting the next episode. We will end off with the wildcard segment to end you with some love and some hope. But that's why I didn't do it today, is because the content itself, I think, is of encouragement and should encourage you as Canadians that we're starting to take steps in the right direction. Have yourselves a good night. I love you. Peace out.